Welcome to the Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. I am glad to see that some of you are here, even though I'm sure that most of you would rather be off in Portland at the show tonight. But it's all good. We're here, and we are ready to go. So the topic tonight is, what is the topic? Silencing the inner gamma. And the subject came up tonight because we were dealing with another of those just seemingly inexplicable gamma double downs on the blog today. And I was talking to one of the moderators about it and trying to figure out why people do this. Why do gammas insist on behaving the way that they do when they know it can't possibly end well? A gamma is a pattern of male behavior. It's one of the 6 major patterns of male behavior that we've observed. It's something of my device. It's not my creation. As I point out on a regular basis, I am simply performing psychological taxonomy. I'm simply observing existing patterns of behavior and then providing a name to it. If somebody steals something, calling them a thief does not make them a thief. It is the stealing that is defined as thievery that makes them the thief. It's the act that makes them the thief. We are simply describing it, giving it a name. We're not creating it. The scientists or the biologists who discovered the okapi and named it the okapi did not create the animal. The animal was always there. These patterns of behavior have always been there. It's really kind of fascinating because when you read old books, you can see how far back Alpheus Alpha may have his gamma moments, caught up in this, that, or the other thing. In the names don't matter. Different animals have different names in different languages. It doesn't change what the animal is. Was Moses an alpha? Yeah, absolutely. Moses was raised as a prince. He was raised as an imperial prince in Egypt. And then he committed murder because he was challenged. And then he ended up leading his entire people out and facing down Pharaoh, an emperor. Moses was not gamma. Moses was also not sigma. Moses was absolutely an alpha. Was Aaron the archetypical Bravo? He was in a Bravo role, but some of his behavior was a little bit gamma. Judas was definitely a gamma. Absolutely. Hey Vox, how would you sum up the Bible in one sentence? The Bible is true. That's what I would say. Dances with Logos gets it. He says, the gamma inside me would say Moshe. Who cares? Who cares? Grizzly Mama Bear says, my dad is a stereotypical selfish boomer. He used to be a delta with gamma tendencies, but the gamma is taking over as he ages. I think that's not unheard of. Is that a common pattern? Well, I mean, it's common for people to lose sociosexual hierarchy rank as they age. You know, the handsome lady killing alpha becomes that, oh, he's so cute, old man. How can that not affect your psychology and your pattern of behavior? I mean, there are rare types who maintain their high level of hierarchy. You know, The Godfather is a great example. People all humbling themselves before him and asking him for favors and that sort of thing. But even there, he maintains the pattern of behavior, but despite his very high alpha status with men, he's probably not particularly attractive to women just because he's so old. If you could only use 5 words to describe a gamma, what would they be? A man who lies. I only need 4. What the gamma is, and this was kind of interesting. I was given some thoughts. I was given some ideas about this because I was asking someone, why do gammas always need to try to correct people? I am much better educated than the vast majority of people I encounter. I went to a better university. I got a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts. I was a double major. I've lived in a number of different countries. I speak a number of different languages, none of them particularly well, but enough to read for pleasure and be able to talk about pretty much anything and so forth. And I would estimate that probably about 25 to 30% of the stuff that I hear people say is more or less wrong in some capacity, in some way. But I don't feel any need to correct people most of the time. What does it matter to me if they pronounce something incorrectly? What is it to me if they believe something that I know to be false? Doesn't matter. And yet, you see these gammas time and time and time again. I mean, today, there was a guy who he's been on the blog for a while. He's a very unpopular individual there just because he's constantly trying to lecture. Anytime anybody says anything that gives him an excuse to correct them, he leaps in with a big lecture. And this is irritating to most people. Now, I didn't really mind it that much until, because I frankly don't pay that much attention. But it really finally came to my notice when I realized that on a particular comment thread, the guy's comments were a significant percentage of the total comments. And it was just constantly trying to correct people, lecture people, etc., etc. And so I was asking one of the moderators for some insight into this, because I said, I don't understand this. I mean, even when you definitely know, what's the point in trying to correct people? And even worse, why on earth would you try to correct people on concerning subjects that you observably know nothing about, that you clearly don't know anything about, but you try to come up with some rational argument that allows you to opine in ignorance? And so when you look at this pattern of behavior, the answer that I was given, and I'm not entirely certain about this, but I was told that it stems from an inherent intrinsic belief and perception of their own inferiority. So what they're constantly attempting to do is to establish a point of superiority that they can feel good about. But because this feeling of inferiority is persistent, they need to pursue this again and again. It's almost like a drug to them. And when you look at this pattern of behavior, it actually makes some sense. Because why? I said, well, that's when I raised the point. I said, I frequently observe people saying things that are correctable, but I don't feel any strong sense, certainly less any need to correct them. And he laughed and he said, that's because you naturally tend to feel superior to most other people. You don't care about their opinion at all. So, it stands to reason that if a natural feeling of superiority removes that need, that it would be that the need to correct, the need to pursue correction as a drug is something that stems from a intrinsic feeling of inferiority. And that's where I think a lot of this comes down to not just childhood experiences, childhood trauma, childhood accomplishments, etc., etc. But it also, I believe, has something to do with testosterone. When you look at the problem that these gammas have, with their incessant dishonesty, these feelings of inferiority, and the pursuit of moments of superiority, it makes me suspect that this has something to do with a lack of testosterone. And that's one reason I think why lifting weights and so forth actually has a tendency to reduce the gamma behavioral pattern. And when you're looking at, there's an interesting thing. I don't know if you've heard of this book before. A lot of you will have, but in SJW's Double Down, I actually went into the gamma topic for a while, and there's even I think a useful appendix called Identifying Gamma. And it's interesting. Tacoma Dental says, my gamma brother is 33 years old, unemployed card dealer, lives with my mom, no hard labor ever, won't exercise, but if you saw his Instagram, you'd think he was Dan Bilzerian. Yeah, they're constantly trying to present a false front. Tom Forsyth says, I suspect when Aspies correct things, it is because they care more about facts than people. The idea of wrongness is very troubling in and of itself. It wouldn't occur to them to use it manipulatively. Possibly, but I think that I think that Aspies also have a fundamentally flawed model of human behavior. Both the Aspie and the Gamma thinks that they are helping others, thinks that they are making themselves more attractive, or thinks that they are elevating their status by correcting someone else. And they don't realize that they're actually putting themselves into a dislikable position. You know, this is what I tell people, and I try to explain to people. Do you like your teachers? How many of your teachers do you like? And people say, well, I didn't like it. I said, well, do you like getting corrected by your teacher? And virtually everyone says no. Well, then, if you don't like it when people correct you, if you dislike people for correcting you, especially in public, then why would you think that correcting somebody is going to make them like you better, much less find you attractive? You know, it's really painful to see these guys who have no idea how to talk to girls. You know, it's not like young women get turned on by reading the encyclopedia or reading the dictionary. Anyhow, so a couple of people have said, you know, how do I know? When does gamma strains become full-blown gamma? You know, I feel like I've got some of this stuff. Blah 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 blah. Jessica says, could you describe how gamma behavior is predominantly feminine? I've heard you say that before. Let me read you a little bit from that particular appendix. And I think that will answer a few of these questions. Maybe more than a few. We'll see. So if we go to the appendix here, identifying gamma. And this is something I did in cooperation with the guy who wrote Graduating Gamma. This is a list intended to permit gamma males to identify themselves in the interests of self-improvement. Not all gammas are SJWs, but most male SJWs are gammas. Of course, this list can also be used by women and non-gammas to recognize when they're dealing with a gamma and when they are not. So this is from the view of the individual. You can't recall a single serious online discussion in which you were wrong about anything in the past year. In fact, you can't recall one discussion with any friends or family in which you were wrong about anything in the past year. When you're having an argument with someone and it appears you may be wrong, your most common reaction and the defense to which you habitually resort is to assume that the other person simply doesn't understand what you're saying. When discussing something with someone, and you begin to suspect that you maybe possibly are on the verge of being shown to be wrong, you start to get snarky, you crack lame jokes, and generally try to change the subject before it actually happens. If someone holds an opinion contrary to yours, and you don't believe you have a good defense immediately to hand, you start to look for unrelated ways to disqualify the other person as being less knowledgeable about the subject than you, and will sometimes even go so far as to begin trying to demonstrate that he is not a good person. Definitions are nebulous for you, and you don't hesitate to redefine words in order to suit your immediate needs during a discussion. If someone quotes the dictionary and it disagrees with your definition, it means he is arguing unfairly. Also, the dictionary is wrong. When you are finally shown that you are conclusively wrong about something. It is personally devastating. You remember the terrible experience for years. Avoid the place and the people involved as much as possible, and consider your time spent there to have been a personal failure. Let's see here. If someone says he isn't interested in your opinion, you take it as a personal slight. This lack of interest in your opinion means he isn't interested in you, and he probably hates you as well. If someone tells you a story, this is a good one, you immediately have to follow up that story with one of your own, which may or may not be related to the topic, and of course is more interesting, more important, and longer. If you don't have a good story, you'll just say something snarky in response in order to diminish the other story in some way. This one drives me up the freaking wall. When telling an anecdote to a group and someone mentions he has already heard it, you go ahead and tell it again because you aren't sure if everyone else has heard it. And besides, he will probably enjoy hearing it again. You routinely quote movies, comics, and television shows, complete with funny voices, in your everyday conversation. It can be witty, but it isn't necessarily. And this is an obvious giveaway. You genuinely believe that the quotes are not funny. You can often see them coming. If you start to lose at any game, you find a way to quit if you can. Afterward, you save face by putting down the game or the other players. If someone defeats you at a game or competition, you can't look him in the eye afterwards and will try to avoid him if possible. If you win at a competition, you explain to your opponent all of the things he did wrong, whether he asked for the critique or not. This is something that my wife and I have really been trying to teach our children and excise from our own patterns of behavior, is hearing a question, interpreting what the real purpose behind that question is, and trying to address that real purpose rather than simply answering the question. Now, sometimes that can be a good thing. If you know what somebody's actually after, it can be good to skip ahead. But realistically, it's actually better to simply answer the direct question and let them go on to ask another question if they want to. When you look at this is something I'm personally guilty of. I believe that I know where the person is going with the question, and so I have a temptation to simply skip ahead and answer that. But it's not a good idea. And so what I'm trying to learn how to do, and I'm working on getting better at, is simply answering the question, which is kind of amusing because, unfortunately, it can be amusing when they ask you a question like, "Can you do this?" and you just say, "Yes," and then you leave it up to them to go on to continue where you assume they want to. Will you do this for me? Certainly. Welcome, not sure. Are narcissists usually considered to be gamma? They can be, but I think that a narcissist can be any pattern of behavior. Gamma behavior is not just narcissism. It's different. Ooh, 99 says, yes, I'm sick of annoying gammas trying to guess my motives when I ask a question. exactly. They don't need to know. And it's really, really irksome if you happen to be an individual of very high intelligence, because the ability of the average individual to correctly anticipate where a very high IQ individual is going with something is very low. I always tell people, don't assume you know what my motives are. Don't assume you know what my objectives are. Just answer the damn question. Thomas, stop asking the same question over and over again. If I didn't answer it, I'm not going to answer it. I think wrestling does help gamitude. I think competition helps gamitude. And I was wondering about that, and I was realizing that there's an important lesson you can learn, or there's an important test that you can give yourself, and it's a easier, less painful version of what I call the character test. The character test is something that I learned in martial arts, and it's very, very simple. And it's something that you can't cheat. When you get hit or kicked hard enough to knock you down, and you're down, you have a choice. Do you get up in order to continue getting beaten, or do you stay down? And the thing is that people in a dojo are polite. If you tell them that you're hurt, they will believe you. They assume that you're going to tell the truth, and they will take you at your word. You can go down and hold your ankle, or hold your wrist or whatever, and no one's going to call you on it. No one's going to claim that, oh, you're not hurt. So you can get away with it every single time. But you always know what you did. And this is where the gamma topic touches this, because the gamma will lie to himself. He'll say, well, I couldn't get up, I was hurt, my ankle was twisted, etc., etc. He always has an excuse. But he always knows deep down. He has to delude himself. But you always know that you could have gotten up. And people say, well, why do you think you're so tough? You're so egocentric, blah, blah, blah. Why? Because I passed that test. Respect yourself, and others learn to respect you too. A lot of people don't understand that being tough is what it is. There is, we joke about the difference between the young men's teams, the first team and the second team, and the veterans, because the young men. I was just at a game the other night, and it was interesting because they always just move instantly. They never wait for a second. The ball goes to the left, they're immediately moving to the left. Just constantly boom, 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 boom. With the veterans, there's this brief hesitation before almost everything, because they're constantly trying to decide whether they need to go, whether they need to spend the energy or not. And what I realized is that it was a character test. When there's a point where you're jogging back on defense and suddenly you see that there's an opening and you have to choose whether to sprint or not. No one's going to blame you if you don't see the opening right away. If you wait until the guy on the other team breaks into a sprint. Same as when you're on attack and you're following a shot or not. No one's going to blame you if you don't go charging in when no one's even going to notice if you don't go charging in when one of your teammates goes in and takes a shot. They're all looking to see if it went in or not. And so what I've learned is that I need to look at that as a character test. And if I'm not doing that, then I've realized that my physical weakness is now reached a point of mental weakness, and it's time to sit down, time to take a break. And so, the reason I think that's useful is that even, if you're not in the ring, there's still ways, and I'm sure that there are other equivalents in other sports. The point is that there are ways for you to subject yourself to this character test. There are ways for you to test yourself and figure out, do I have the mental toughness to push myself to do the equivalent of getting up? And so I think that if you're someone who struggles with gamma temptations, then that's something that you should, those are situations that you should attempt to put yourself in order to face them. Do you think that comes from the amount of situations you've seen versus the amount they have, and you're factoring in those as well? It's possible. It's possible. I'm over 50 years old. It's obviously I have a lot of experience upon which to draw. That's one of the advantages of age. It's one of the few advantages of age. You've seen it before. It's kind of funny. I think I've mentioned this before, but one of the first things I tell the younger veterans when they first move up to our league is that you cannot you must not underestimate the old fat guys. There's always one or two guys on each team that is at least 40 pounds overweight. Maybe not 40 pounds, but at least 20 pounds overweight. And they usually tend to be physically big, but not always. They tend to be, in their mid-40s, and they can't run anymore. They can't beat anyone on the ball. They can't really play defense all that well. But you know what they can do? They can still shoot from 40 meters out. And, it's kind of like same as in basketball. If you go in there and you're playing a pickup basketball game and there's some old fat guy, I can tell you right now, you don't want to leave him alone on the 3-point line, because probably the one thing he can do is hit from 3. And it was funny, we're one of our best players now, when he'd been playing on the men's second team, and he moved up to join us. And I told him this. I said, whatever you do, I said, especially, I even pointed the guy out. I said, he's fat and he's out of shape. I said, that means you can't leave him alone to shoot. And it was funny because, sure enough, he was like 35 meters away from the goal. And this particular defender, that old guy, saw him back off, immediately took the shot, put it up in the upper right-hand corner from 35 meters, goal. My teammate looked over at me and I said, I told you, you know, so always be careful when you see old guys doing something, because the chances are that if they're old and they're still doing it, they are probably very, very good at something. There's a reason they're still able to do it. So let's do some super chats now. Okay. Upchuck McDuck says, follow up from a few days ago. Why was pre-World War I Europe the pinnacle of civilization, in your opinion? Because the fundamentals, the foundations of Western civilization were still strong. Christianity was still dominant. The European nations were unadulterated, more or less. And the Greco-Roman philosophic and legal legacy were still very, very dominant. You know, once World War I got started, that's when all of those things began to fall apart. So I think that's where we can... Now, there were people who observed that, you know, this was not going to last. You can look at Oswald Spengler, for example, who predicted it. There were others who saw the decline coming. But I think that it is easier to make a case for that than pretty much any other time. But I'm open to hearing other opinions. M. Bolstered does his thing. Thank you. Cynic and Chief is eating a Chilito / chili cheese burrito at Taco Bell right now. I congratulate you. I'm not going to pretend I'm not envious. Bearbrain Schemer says, unauthorized TV is fantastic. Looking forward to seeing Rebels run progress and excited for the reprint of the Junior Classics. Logos is rising. I certainly hope so. Speaking of unauthorized TV, there is a new Barcelona Life that's up. And we've also got the 3 parts of the Bucket Tour back up again. So these are all actually kind of related, because the new Barcelona Life is a trip to Mallorca, which is really beautiful. The view they had from the place they got there was just astonishing. Nick's Music says, will New England islands be safe if the U.S. collapses? Safer than some places, not as safe as others. I mean, you know, New England is pretty converged and pretty adulterated, so you know, that's not good. On the other hand, it's not really the kind of place that a lot of people necessarily are going to want to be. So Satoshi Bear does his thing. Thank you. Bear Brain Schemer said, a lot keeping you busy. I know, mere Christianity. Yeah, we're going to get on that. Maybe even tomorrow. Rhino Bear says, Sabaton. Thank you. I don't know how I'm responsible for Sabaton, but you're certainly welcome. Thomas W. says, what was the Apostle Thomas? Delta or not enough information? I would say not enough information. It's, you know, it's hard to say. John Doe says, a valuable part of your social sexual hierarchy observation I've realized is the contextual aspect of it. Yeah, exactly. That's why I keep trying to point out the fractal and contextual aspects. A man can be a delta outside the home. I now suspect that that's really only part of it. I think it's partly that they try to gain status, but I think it's also partly that they attempt to deal with their own inferiority status by scoring moments of superiority to try to make themselves feel better that way. Grizzly Mama Bear says, to understand gammas, remember that they create a fantasy versions of themselves in their own head first. Absolutely. The lies are to convince themselves it is real. Precisely. You know, that's why we talk about the gamma delusion bubble. The deeper into gamma behavior a man entwines himself, the stronger his delusion bubble is going to be. Gran Torino says, Vox, I inadvertently called you a gamma on my last stream with E. Michael Jones. I quickly corrected to sigma. Just wanted to clear that up. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've been losing a lot of sleep recently ever since. And so, now I feel like I'll be able to sleep soundly again. No, I do appreciate you correcting that, though. That is appreciated. Camilo Asturitsaga says, how much gamma is nature versus nurture? I would say 75% nature, 25% nurture. There's not much you can do when you're, born 5'6", moderately intelligent with no chin. You're not good at anything. And, that is harder to overcome than just mommy telling you you're a special boy. Obviously the two things put together are where the real problems are begun. But I think the nature aspects are more difficult to overcome than the nurture aspects. Katie says, Vox, you're the man. Well, I attempt to be. Tiger says, how does one de-gamma himself? Asking for a friend. Read Graduating Gamma. Read SJW's Always Double Down. We address this stuff. Watch the Voxiversities on Gamma. We're actually going to do a Voxiversity. In fact, I've been meaning to record it for like 3 months. I'm going to narrate Graduating Gamma and get it up there just for people like you. So I will try to prioritize that. Drew Jabert says, I'm trying to graduate Gamma. I can feel myself subconsciously denying that I have shown these Gamma traits and excusing those I can't deny. Yeah, that's what Gammas do. That's what you are feeling there, is you're feeling the urge to inflate your delusion bubble. Resist that. Be brutal with yourself. The more brutally honest you are with yourself, and I mean brutally honest, not ludicrously dramatic. Telling yourself, I'm the worst person ever, and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. You're not in a play. You're not an actor. This is philosophy, not drama. So be brutally honest with yourself. I'm good at this. I'm not good at that. When this happened, I did not win. I was the butt of the joke here. I embarrassed myself here. I humiliated myself here. These people humiliated me, or I felt humiliated when these people publicly mistreated me. Be honest with yourself. Kevin Bros throws in $2. And Aaron E. says, is it possible the West is importing non-Westerners for not only cheap labor, but to counter the larger armies of the East in light of World War III? No, I don't believe so at all. Example given, the liberal pandering, selling out of national sovereignty could be a guise. Thoughts? No, there's no chance at all. The West, there's nobody in the West who's importing these people for the benefit of the West. Not a chance. Why do so many Gamma males I know wear mom jeans? I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. This is probably one of those areas where living in Europe doesn't help, because people, especially guys, just wear what I would personally, having grown up as an American, consider to be totally bizarre pants that are more than a little gay. So I haven't seen any young men wearing mom jeans. Let's see. Dr. Evil says, Vox, I heard you do your streams without pants on. Is this true? No, of course it's not true. I have children. I don't ever walk around the house without pants on. Let's see here. Not for Nothing says, do you believe Madeleine McCann was abducted? Yes. Medieval History is my favorite show, says Ty Richards. And let's see here. I should just, okay. Patrick Bergen says, what martial arts did you study? It was a combination of Wing Chun Kung Fu, the Shorin-ryu Karate recent replacement, and I'm down to a healthy weight for the first time. I would not recommend doing serious contact stuff then. You actually sound like a serious injury waiting to happen. I mean, this is a case where maybe Tai Chi or something is more useful. I should just go here. I'll go over to the Super Chats alone. I can't keep track with all the different comments. Let's see. What are the top 3 things to teach a 6-year-old son that has strong gamma tendencies? Okay. If they already have strong gamma tendencies, then the first thing you need to tell them is you're not fooling anyone. Gammas always think that they're somehow pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. So it's very important to make them understand, they're not fooling anybody. So number 1, you're not fooling anyone. Number 2, finish it. Don't quit. If your son's got a strong gamma tendency, he's going to try to quit things. And the third thing would be I guess the third thing would be don't go through the motions. That's kind of related to the first thing, but it's a little bit more specific. I'm thinking more in terms of gammas have a strong tendency to like go through the motions so that they don't get criticized. If they're playing pee-wee football, then they'll be afraid to tackle, so they'll just kind of like make a little lunge that can't possibly work, that kind of thing. Because what they're doing is their main motivation is to make enough of a move, make enough of an action to forestall criticism without actually trying to accomplish the task. So that's what I would recommend. And on your part, call them out every time they lie. Just say, that's not true. Tell me the truth. Robert said, you told me I'm probably a gamma a while back. Some old friends and my wife think I'm an omega. They're probably more likely to be correct than I am. They know you better. My gamma tendencies are resentment and fear of failure. I mean, there are bigger problems to have. If you're able to actually face reality and not construct a delusion bubble, great. I'm dealing with it regardless. Thanks, Vox. Yeah, that's all you can do. it doesn't give me any great pleasure to tell people, look, you're obviously a gamma, shut the hell up and stop doing that. It doesn't give me pleasure to do that. I don't like to deal with that. I don't like to deal with gammas at all. I would prefer that everybody was just happily delta, getting stuff done, crushing, succeeding, moving forward, etc., etc. If I wear my UTV shirt to the Ren Fair, will it be recognized? Almost certainly not. Or will I be beaten or applauded? I don't think anyone who goes to the Renaissance Fair is going to be inclined to try to take on somebody who's reprehensible or unauthorized. My son is performing there. Yeah, I don't think you have anything to worry about. Reading on says, hey Vox, what is the difference between a grifter and someone who changes because they realize the truth? Well, if they're a grifter, they don't have any principles. If they're a grifter, they're just telling people what they want to hear. And so you can tell because what they say will change depending on their audience. Somebody who genuinely changes because they realize the truth is not going to change their story depending on what benefits them most at the time. The grifter will. In fact, somebody actually sent me, like, for example, someone who is a Candace Owens fan recently sent me an email admitting that I was correct about them. It literally says, you are right about her. She posted something on Twitter saying, if I were president, the punishment for burning the U.S. flag would be the renunciation of citizenship. No jail time, no fine, simply 1 year to liquidate your assets and get the hell out of our country. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. In exchange, we'd extend citizenship to a hardworking, legal immigrant. So nationality is based on your opinion of the flag? No. She's not on our side. Not even close. What are good heuristics to ID a grifter? Well, if they're on Fox News, that's a really good one. If they're always asking for money, if everything always comes back to money, if their opinions seem to be focused on staying in line with what is considered mainstream acceptable, if they are afraid to, noticeably afraid to speak the truth, I'll think more about that, but just look at what's the common denominator between Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens and Jordan Peterson. They're always pitching. They're always selling. Basically, a grifter is a salesperson, a salesman who primarily sells himself. Think about this. How often do I try to talk you guys into buying any of my books? I realize this is not the optimal stream to suggest that, since I was just referring to SJW's Always Double Down earlier. But the point is, even though I did that tonight, it's not something that I do regularly. We talk about other stuff. Also, it tends to deal with a bit of ambition. A grifter never turns down an opportunity unless there's a better opportunity. Frank Underwood says, if gamma is linked to testosterone, then the changes in physical activity and diet over the last 40 years probably contribute a lot to the problem. Well, I think that's true, and I think that's probably why they're pushing it. All the crap that that whole food pyramid thing they were pushing back in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, is actively bad for you. Now we're finding that You should be eating red meat, washing it down with red wine, and finishing it off with dark chocolate. You know, you're much better off doing that. Breakfast is not the best part of the day. You should skip it as part of your intermittent fasting. You will be better off. Yeah. I don't think it's an accident that they are putting all kinds of crap in the food and then telling you to eat stuff that's not good for you. I doubt it's a coincidence. I have children is something most gammas don't understand. Exactly. If you're going to be at Owen's show, feel free to stop by the blog and post a comment. Let us know how it went. I'm going to leave up the tour support t-shirt for 1 more hour. And so this is your last opportunity to pick up a tour support t-shirt, which you can do at arkhavencomics.com. So, have a good evening. This is the Darkstream. I'm Voxday.